February 27, 1999. A soundstage in New York. A man in a tracksuit adjusts his gold chains, slicks back his silver-streaked hair, and steps into character. Paulie Walnuts. Paranoid, superstitious, violent, loyal to a fault. But here's what most people didn't know. Tony Sirico wasn't studying the mob. He had survived it before HBO cameras, before award shows, before Paulie became iconic. There were 28 arrests, 7 years behind bars, armed robberies, extortion charges, 2 bullets lodged in his body during a warehouse job gone wrong. This wasn't research, this was memory. When Tony Sirico walked onto the set of The Sopranos, he didn't need to learn how a wise guy stood or how he talked or how he reacted to disrespect. He'd grown up around men like that. He'd been one of them. The swagger wasn't rehearsed. The attitude wasn't coached. The silence when someone crossed the line, that was real. And there was one rule he refused to break. When HBO offered him the role of Paulie Gualtieri, Tony agreed on one condition. Paulie could never be a rat. No wire, no cooperation, no betrayal. Even in fiction, Tony Sirico wouldn't violate the code, because in his world, some rules weren't negotiable. This is the story of how a real Brooklyn street soldier became one of television's most unforgettable characters, and how the life he lived off camera shaped every second we saw on screen. But to understand Paulie Walnuts, you have to understand the neighborhood that built Tony Sirico. Brooklyn, 1940s, Bensonhurst, and a kid who wanted in. Brooklyn, late 1940s, Bensonhurst. Back then, it wasn't just an Italian neighborhood, it was an ecosystem. Narrow streets lined with brick row houses, fire escapes hanging like metal ribs, mothers yelling from windows, kids playing stickball in the street until the streetlights came on, and on certain corners, men who didn't work 9 to 5. They wore pressed suits on weekdays, gold pinky rings, shined shoes, Cadillacs parked at the curb. They spoke quietly. But when they spoke, people listened. No one called them criminals. They called them connected. And young Tony Sirico was watching. Born Gennaro Anthony Sirico Jr., July 29, 1942, he grew up in a cramped apartment with 4 siblings. His father worked construction. His mother stretched every dollar. Money was tight. Opportunity was limited. But the streets offered something school didn't: status. By 7 years old, Tony was already orbiting the social clubs. Not inside, not yet. Outside, running small errands for older guys, delivering envelopes, watching parked cars, standing lookout for things he didn't fully understand. They'd toss him $1, sometimes 2. But the real payment wasn't cash. It was proximity. He saw how people treated those men. Shop owners nodded respectfully. Neighbors lowered their voices. Nobody challenged them. In Bensonhurst, power wasn't loud. It was understood. By 13, Tony dropped out of school, not because he couldn't learn, because he believed he already was. The real lessons weren't in textbooks. They were happening inside back rooms filled with cigar smoke and whispered negotiations. He'd stand near card tables, listening, learning who outranked who collected money, who answered to whom. The hierarchy fascinated him. This wasn't chaos, it was structure, rules, loyalty, order. Break the rules, you paid. Follow them, you rose. By the time he turned 19, he wasn't just a kid hanging around, he was participating. An armed robbery at a Manhattan nightclub, fast money, quick job. But the police were faster. He got caught. His first serious arrest, a few months inside. And here's the part that matters. When he got out, he didn't get scared, he got sharper. In that world, doing time wasn't shameful. It was proof. Proof you could keep your mouth shut. Proof you wouldn't cooperate. Proof you were solid. Through the 1960s, Tony Sirico became a known associate around crews tied to the Colombo crime family. Not a made guy. He couldn't be formally inducted, but close enough to the life to feel its gravity. Most of his work was stick-ups, high-risk robberies that required nerve, no hesitation, no second thoughts, no talking if something went wrong. And Tony had nerve. He had presence, 6 feet tall, broad-shouldered, slicked back hair, the kind of stare that made strangers look away first. He understood something critical early. In that world, image was armor. The way you dressed, the way you stood, the way you responded to disrespect. Everything communicated strength, and Tony never wanted to look weak. Arrests followed, weapons charges, extortion allegations, assault cases. Some stuck, some didn't. Witnesses changed stories. Charges disappeared. Complaints were withdrawn. That was Brooklyn in the 60s. But there was another side to his reputation. He wasn't just tough, he was volatile. Friends later described him as magnetic, funny, charismatic, able to light up a room. But cross him? And the temperature changed instantly. That unpredictability made him useful. It also made him vulnerable. Because in organized crime, there's one trait more dangerous than weakness. It's impulsiveness. By the early 1970s, Tony Sirico wasn't a kid anymore. He was deep in it, known to police, known on the street, known in certain back rooms where serious conversations happened. And in December 1971, a robbery in Brooklyn would push him to the edge of survival. 2 bullets, a hospital bed, and a decision that could have ended everything. December 1971, Brooklyn, a warehouse job. It was supposed to be simple, in and out, fast money, no complications. Tony and 3 associates targeted a warehouse they believed would be an easy score, the kind of job he'd done before, the kind that built reputations. But something went wrong. Someone called the police. Sirens cut through the night. Panic replaces planning faster than people realize. Shots were fired. In the chaos, Tony was hit. The first bullet struck his leg, a grazing shot. The second one lodged dangerously close to his spine. He didn't feel pain immediately, just impact, like getting hit with a bat. Then the weakness set in. He collapsed. The robbery was over. Not with cash. With blood on concrete and flashing lights outside. He was arrested from a hospital bed. 20 years was on the table. 20 years for robbery, weapons, attempted charges. He was 29 years old. And now came the decision that defines men in that world. Cooperate or stay silent. Cooperation could reduce the sentence, give names, shift blame, cut a deal, or take the time, keep your reputation intact. Tony chose silence. No statements, no testimony, no cooperation. He pled guilty. He got 4 years. And he was sent to Sing Sing Correctional Facility, maximum security. Sing Sing in the 1970s wasn't a place for reflection. It was survival. Overcrowded tiers, constant tension, guards who didn't intervene unless they had to, inmates who enforced their own order. Violence wasn't dramatic, it was routine. Tony didn't shrink inside. He fought multiple times. Solitary confinement followed more than once. Concrete walls, metal bed, silence thick enough to hear your own breathing echo. But something unexpected happened inside those walls. A prison theater program, volunteer-run acting classes. Most inmates joined for time off the tier. A distraction, a break from monotony. Tony signed up. Not because he dreamed of Hollywood, because prison strips you of identity, and performance, even temporary, gives some of it back. He discovered something strange. When he stepped onto that small prison stage, he didn't feel fake. He felt understood. He could command a room. His timing was natural, his presence undeniable. When he played street guys, it wasn't acting, it was memory. Other inmates watched him and saw authenticity, not performance. The acting coach saw it too. Raw, unpolished, dangerous charisma. And here's the irony. In a maximum security prison, surrounded by men who'd destroyed their futures, Tony Sirico found the one thing that could change his. 4 years passed. When he walked out in 1975, he was 33 years old. Most men leave prison and return to what they know, the same corners, the same crews, the same cycle. Tony could have. His reputation was still intact. He hadn't cooperated, he hadn't broken. The street would have taken him back. But prison had done something bullets hadn't. It made him pause. He'd seen men get life sentences, seen men stabbed over small disputes, seen men grow old behind walls that never move. And for the first time, he considered an exit. The streets had given him status. Prison had shown him the bill. Now he had a choice. Go back. or try something no one in his world would take seriously: acting. When Tony Sirico walked out of Sing Sing in 1975, he wasn't a kid anymore. He was 33. He had scars, a prison record, a reputation on the street, and a strange new idea in his head: acting. At first, it didn't look like redemption. It looked like typecasting. Directors didn't see range. They saw Brooklyn. They saw the slicked back hair, the stare, the posture. They saw a man who didn't need coaching to look dangerous. And that was enough. His first real film appearance came in the late 1970s. Small roles, background mob soldiers, enforcers with few lines and heavy presence. He wasn't getting rich, he wasn't headlining posters, but he was staying out of prison, and that mattered. Through the 80s and early 90s, Tony became a familiar face in crime films: Fingers, Defiance, Bullets Over Broadway. A small part in Goodfellas. He stood on sets with actors who studied mob behavior in books, while he remembered it from experience. Between takes, he'd tell stories, real ones, about stick-ups, about prison, about guys who didn't make it out. The actors listened, because Tony wasn't pretending. He had lived what they were rehearsing, but even then, he was still walking a thin line. The streets never fully disappear. Old habits linger. Arrests continued through the years. Nothing major enough to send him away long-term, but enough to remind him how close the edge still was. And then came 1989, his 28th arrest. Details are murky: a dispute, a nightclub, something small that could have become something bigger, but this time, something shifted. Tony was 47 years old. He had been arrested nearly 30 times. He had survived bullets, survived prison, but survival isn't permanent. Luck runs out. And that was the moment he made a clean break. No more street life, no more double identity, just acting, legitimate work, no going back. That decision changed everything, because less than a decade later, the call came. HBO was developing a show, a serious drama about the New Jersey mob, not a movie, a television series, long form, psychological, real. They needed someone to play Paulie Gualtieri, mid-level soldier, obsessed with respect, paranoid, superstitious, old school, loyal. When Tony Sirico read the script, he didn't see a character, he saw familiarity. He had known men exactly like Paulie. He had sat across from them at card tables. He had done time with them. He understood how they thought, how they held grudges, how they valued loyalty over logic, how ego could turn small slights into lifelong feuds. But before he accepted the role, Tony had one condition: Paulie could never be a rat. No cooperation, no wearing wires, no testifying, even if the storyline demanded it, even if it created drama. Tony Sirico refused to portray a character who broke omerta, not for ratings, not for money, not for HBO. And here's what makes that powerful. He wasn't protecting a fictional mob code. He was protecting his own past. David Chase agreed, and that agreement shaped Paulie Walnuts for 6 seasons. While other characters flipped, while others cooperated, Paulie remained loyal, sometimes irrationally, sometimes dangerously, but always loyal, because Tony Sirico wouldn't allow anything else. When The Sopranos premiered in January 1999, it changed television, and Paulie Walnuts became one of its most iconic figures. Not because he was heroic, not because he was kind, but because he felt real. The hair, the tracksuits, the constant mirror checking, the superstition, the obsession with respect. None of it was exaggerated. It was remembered. Tony didn't build Paulie from imagination. He built him from memory. And the men who had actually lived that life, they noticed. There are accounts of real wise guys watching the show and saying the same thing: he got it right. Not because he glorified it, but because he didn't fake it. For the first time in his life, Tony Sirico was being rewarded for the very world he had nearly been destroyed by.